What's going on, guys? G2 here. Welcome back to the channel. And today we are going to be finishing up our wood furniture. We did our pistol grip inlay, our hand stop inlay in our last videos. You can see they turned out nice. And today, just to finish it off, we're going to be doing our hand guard. Now, hand guard is in KeyMod, so we're going to have to convert it to KeyMod. This was my trial sample that I did, and this turned out great. You can see fits in here real nice. When we screw it down, gets in there really snug. So what we're going to do is we're going to do it using our wood so everything matches. Specs and everything else is pretty much the same. Now what you can do, or what we used as a template, was basically an old KeyMod rail that we had laying around, just to get the spacing, because it is important with KeyMod that your holes are, the correct distance apart. And while you could measure using the actual KeyMod slots, I find this to be a lot more accurate. So what we have here is a 5-space KeyMod, and we're going to use that as our template. And essentially, we're just going to hold this over where we want the KeyMod to start, put our two little marks with our holes, and then we're going to call it a day. Now with this, what we wanted to make sure is when we have this first position piece up, I wanted it, well, you could be different on your choice, but I wanted mine to be flush to the front of the handguard. And to that, you can do one of two things. You can set them up and cut them, or you can just set it up so it sits that way from the beginning, and that's what I did. We don't want it, obviously, if we went the other way, we wouldn't want it hanging over. It doesn't look too finished. Using this as our template, we're going to get our piece here. We're going to split it down the middle, and then we're going to have one slat for this side, one slat for the other side, and then our furniture is done. Now if you have KeyMod already, you can get the screws on eBay, or on Amazon or whatever. Not expensive at all, maybe $8 for 12 sets. Or if you just want to get a KeyMod Picatinny rail section, they'll come with the hardware that you need. So whichever way you want to do, that's up to you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over to the miter saw, and I'm basically just going to cut this guy in half. We measured, we have our center line here, and we're just going to split it right down the middle. Alright, so we've got these cut even, good to go. Now what we're going to have to do is drill our holes. Now KeyMod is a little different from M-LOK, obviously, in terms of its fastening, but in the back here you'll see KeyMod uses, just like M-LOK does, a screw and a nut. And this nut, if we can see here, is not quite round. It's a little oblong, and even on top of that, it almost has this is a better way to look at it. It has kind of an oval shape to it. Now if you look on the back of that, you can see that oval shape, and what that does is when we have our screw in there, it helps lock that in. We want to make sure that when we're drilling our holes on the back side, we have something that's going to allow this screw to lock in. So as we're tightening it, it doesn't turn on itself, and then you'll never be able to tighten it. It'll just keep spinning. Now what I did was, on my sample, I did kind of a mortise, and that seemed to work. So when we sat those in there, doesn't look too pretty on the back, but that's why it's a test. You can see it kind of holds that in there. And essentially what we did is we used a Forstner bit. Now this is a 1/4 inch Forstner bit, and we just did one, moved it over, and did two. Now we used the hand drill, which is a little challenging for this, so the drill press is much easier because you can be very, very, very precise with that and get a really nice, I guess, routed opening, or Forstner bit cut opening. But it did the job. So I would suggest that if you're doing this, this is where you start. Don't drill the hole all the way through first, because once you have that hole, this bit is going to want to always walk into that hole, and it's going to make it very challenging for you. So we've got our holes marked out where we want them. We're going to pick which side we want the front and which side to be the back. I think these are going to be my fronts, because the grain looks a little better here than on that. That's kind of got a darkness to it. So we'll just mark these as back so we know what we're working with. So to give you a little idea here, this is how we set this up. We just put the rail on top of our stock piece, we center it up, and then you just mark it. Using clamps holds it in place, keeps it on center, and you'll be fine. Alright, so now that we've got our centers marked, what we're going to do is, using our Forstner bit and our drill, we're going to just kind of take half. We're going to use our center mark as our spot, and we want it to come over half of that hole. Alright, so we're going to come over half the hole, and then we're going to go on the other side of the mark and go over half, and that'll give us our little bit of our KeyMod kind of spot here. And then using just a little bit of, I'll show you using a utility knife, you can clean up those edges on it. One thing I forgot to add here also, when we're doing this, you don't want to go all the way through, okay? We only want to look for a depth that's the size of our KeyMod piece, which is, according to this, if we were to look at our Forstner bit, comes about halfway up. So using a piece of tape or a marker, mark around, put a little piece of tape there, so that gives you kind of like a little depth, so you know where to stop. You don't want to blow through this. Alright, so what you're going to end up with is something that kind of looks like this. Now, didn't do a great job on these, but it's okay. And using just a utility knife, what you're going to do is just clean up those edges. As you see, cleans that up nice. You have a nice little collar for this guy to sit in. Perfect. So just do that for all four of yours, and we'll get to drilling all the way through. Alright, so now we've got those all cleaned out. Now we're going to go to our fronts here. We have our center points marked, and we're going to drill basically our holes for our screws to go through. Now, these screws are 5/32 of an inch wide. You can see they're 5/32, so you're going to use a 5/32 drill bit and drill all the way through. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come back and we're going to countersink these, so these guys sit nice and flush to the face of the wood. Alright, so we've got our holes drilled out here. Now, using a countersink bit, we're just going to countersink these slightly to allow for the taper of our screw head. You don't have to go deep here. Essentially, as these are done. Now, but what we're going to do is we want to contour them, because we don't want to have this blocky piece, when we're holding on to this. So we're going to contour them along the sides and the front, much like we did our hand grip. Now, the contouring is up to you. I'm going to use a belt sander, just kind of work these edges off, work the flats, kind of give it a little bit of a smoother feel. How you want to contour it is perfectly up to you. I'm going to leave that to you, and I'll show you what mine looks like when we're done, and we'll install. Alright, so our contouring is done. You got it, put a little dip in there for when we're holding on to it. You contour it however you want. I'm not going to tell you which is the right way and which is the wrong way. This is totally personal preference at this point. Now, before we install these, I'm going to get some linseed oil. And just, now you can use tung oil if you want, any kind of wood finishing oil. I would suggest you do this. Put a little bit on these. And what this is going to do is it's really going to make that grain pop, and also protect it as well. And the reason we put this obviously before we install is because we want to be able to get all around it. And if you look at the difference between those two, it's night and day. The grain like just absolutely pops out of this. Now linseed, what you want to do is you want to just put it on there, let it soak in there. Pores of the wood will absorb that linseed oil and just kind of get it all in there. If you want to, a little additional tip is if you want to heat your wood up with a hair dryer just for, you know, a minute or so, just to get it warm, it's going to open those pores and allow that linseed oil to really penetrate in there. But that is up to you. Usually this is enough to get it done. Okay, so we're going to let those sit, I don't know, for about maybe an hour or so. Let that oil really penetrate inside there. And then we're going to come back with a microfiber cloth. We're going to buff them off, and then we're going to install. See you then. All right, guys, so we're back. We have our foregrips here installed. They look real nice. They're contoured, as you can see. We've got a little bit of a grip here so we can hold on to them. We put a little bit of contour here so we can get a nice weld on these, and overall I am extremely happy with how these turned out. The only thing I may do is I may get some KeyMod nuts and bolts here in this kind of aluminum silver color so they match the rest of the fastening hardware on the pistol. But other than that, I think this turned out great. What do you think? DIY furniture for your AR. It's not as hard as you'd think. Just takes a little bit of time, a little bit of measurement, and you're gonna mess up, so factor in that as well. Always get a little bit more material than you expected to account for errors. So until next time, make sure that you're practicing safe weapon handling at all times and treating every weapon as if it was loaded. God bless America. G2 out.